Well, I think I'd like to go into the next question and pull you others of you in, and then begin to kind of think about where do we go from here? I mean, I think we began to define some of the elements of what we have working for us now. What are some of the things that we have learned from Wright and we can take to the next level of our understanding of the world, and how design can kind of work into these new solutions?
I guess fundamentally reading back through his principles, I mean, he had a very good set of values and principles and ethics. And he, in reading that, put it together in a very succinct way, at least as it applied to his professional world. I don't know, his personal world's a little bit different, but and design, very much the life of the world I work in, is a continuum. And it does seem, as human beings, we're pretty good at adding complexity to the equation. But how do we get back to the simplicity on the far side of complexity? Is actually, when I look at some of Frank Lloyd Wright's work, he let materials be the materials they were, and they let them live in nature, and that is sort of the far side of the complexity coming together in the way he put together his architecture and his environment. And it's easy to do things differently, but to do things better is really a pretty noble challenge, and I think it's an important time to do that. And sometimes I guess I'm thinking about Frank Lloyd Wright, are we asking the right questions? You know, what are the right questions to ask? And maybe we're a little bit, you know, the world's in crisis and we're a little bit in survivor mode, but those are some of the best, that's when the world is the most open to change.
So where do we go? How do we go forward, Sashi?
There's an aspect to going forward that is about our history, and the indigenous people had a way of doing that, which was through telling stories, and they didn't even record them. We didn't have a history, but somehow they learned the important things, and the important things were about the humanity, and they were about the pitfalls and the dangers, but ultimately it was about moving people forward, and people forward in terms of a community, and moving us all forward in a way that sustained life in an improved manner.
I think what you're talking about, what we're all talking about, is really reaching out of ourselves and getting some good counseling, and not just therapy, but really understanding the larger world and what it means to be a human being, anthropology, psychology, people who understand the land. First Andrew and then Bob.
And thinking about Bob and his farm, consequences of our actions. Thinking about, you know, if we design products, when we use products, we rarely understand the complete life cycle of that product. You know, you don't know where it came from. You know you own it right now, but then you don't know where it goes at the end of its life. I think a more holistic approach to any object, any space, is to understand more effectively the consequences of what you're doing. We have a very throwaway culture, which is only now waking up to the realization that there are going to be consequences to our actions. And I think to understand better where stuff came from, how you're going to use it now, and where it's going to go, I think is going to make us better designers, is going to make us more contented people. I think that we've lost, and I think we need to consider that again. I think we are going to have to consider that again in what we design and how we use it.
So Bob, I think you may want to come in here, because I think what Andrew is identifying tends to, it's the right thing that we're talking about, but tends to paralyze a lot of people. If we have to think about these things, then why are we designing all these things that we're designing? And then of course, when that's a sure way to shut down factories and then kill the economy. So we can't not produce, because jobs and livelihoods and all of those things, variety, all of those things that as a society, as human beings are used to. So how do we begin to unravel this sort of redesigning of everything?
It was a perfect setup, actually, and yeah, I think we can look at it as incredibly scary and daunting, or we can simply look at it as the greatest opportunity that we've ever had as a community of designers and creators. And I think that the potential for reinvigoration of, not only our practice and our areas of expertise, but in fact our industries and the kind of the fabric of our economy and our society, that we have this great opportunity to start to look further in terms of the things that we touch and do as a community of designers, and acknowledge that in fact, we can design products and buildings and so on and so forth, but actually the things that we're designing are community and our society and all these aspects of the things that surround us. In a sense, we're still building incrementally from what we've learned from the Industrial Revolution in the way that we structure our daily lives. And in fact, our society now has been created to support that, and we're seeing that there are a lot of unintended consequences that we're having problems with. So how do we as designers then acknowledge that, it's part of the responsibility that we can take on, besides being really clever about form and aesthetics and fit and function and those other things. And if we do start to take that on and think more broadly, not only about where things come from and where they go, but also these kind of larger ripple effects that we have out into our society, how does it then position us to start solving some of these problems in a new way? And I believe that we can have a profound impact through doing so.
How are you guys thinking about this shift? Because when you pronounce cradle to cradle, you're not talking about the same thing that we talked about when everything ended up in the garbage dump. So what's your thought on that?
I think some of Steelcase's initiatives about taking toxicity out of the materials is certainly a good place to start on that. It is a little bit of a conundrum because when you think about materials, you would like to recycle and reuse everything. The problem is that as we live today, the cost of the recycled material versus the cost of a raw material, there's a great difference. And the cost of recycled material is always more expensive, which is an unfortunate consequence. And I guess at some point, at least in my opinion, I'd rather have government just mandate it. And then you would see this level of efficiency come in that would allow for recycled materials to really become an important part of the supply chain.
So you're giving us one more reason to call Obama a socialist, a fascist?
Well, it's hard in a free market when you say we want to sell on price, yet we want all the social impact stuff to be as important. And you can make a product that's completely green and recycled. The Think Chair from Steelcase, I was very impressed that Steelcase did that. It takes a lot of extra effort to do that, and but it can be as easily done as taking your own bag to the grocery store. It is an interesting question, and I think it's a very important question, and it's one that's been long overdue. And I think what is equally as good is that public awareness is probably at an all-time high.
So Andrew, as our Dr. Dent, as our materials expert, I'm not asking you to be practical. I'm asking you to dream. What would you do to solve this issue? Because there is that incredible resource that we potentially see in existing product stock, and how do we sort of reuse it and bring it together? Do you just dream?
Well, it's already been dreamt, and it is cradle to cradle. I mean, we all understand, once you read that book, and once you understand the principles, that ideally, that is the solution. You either have something which is recyclable, or you have something which is compostable. Those are the only two possibilities you can have. Problem is, it's not easy to do. Nature's been doing it for millions of years. We have been trying for the last few years. My most often quoted answers when someone asks me about sustainability, whether a product is green, what we should use, it's always very much, it depends. And you need to work it out yourself. You need knowledge, but also every different instance is going to need a different set of parameters. So it's complex. But we have scientists, engineers, we are intelligent people. We should be able to work this out.